Well, thank you very much, Chairman Comer. China has invested in and built relationships with the highest levels of the American business community to advocate and advance the CCP interest in the United States for decades. However, I recently saw that the Chinese e-commerce giant Alibaba is ramping up its global expansion with new services aimed at attracting small businesses in the United States. Small businesses are the backbone of many communities across the United States, especially in a district like mine, New York's 23rd Congressional District. These are family-owned operations. They often don't have the resources to compete with large corporations and could easily be persuaded to be seemingly receiving a helping hand, so to speak, from a Chinese partner. Ms. Kissel, do you see this aggressive outreach to American small business by Chinese conglomerates like Alibaba as something that we should be concerned about?
Yes.
And beyond Alibaba, could you expand for us today on any efforts that you're aware of by the CCP to influence America's small business sector, our local chambers of commerce, or even local governments to gain greater access to communities in small-town America?
Well, when I worked at the State Department, the Secretary made a concerted outreach to state government officials. For instance, I'd refer you to the speech that he made in, I believe it was Wisconsin, talking about how that was a direct effort of the United Front organizations to capture and to influence policymaking on a state level. Now, to your question about small business, as you suggest, is a very vulnerable target. And that is why in my written testimony, I suggest that one of the things that the State Department could do is to educate subnational groupings, so state legislatures, chambers of commerce, and others to these gray zone tactics, which, by the way, the Chinese don't hide. They speak very openly about their so-called magic weapons, namely their efforts to co-opt and influence a wide swath of not just our diplomatic and political community, but our business community as well. And I'll also speak to my personal experience. As I said before, I serve on 2 publicly traded company boards of directors. Most directors of American corporations are former executives, they're accountants, they're operational experts. They're not schooled in Chinese political warfare tactics. It's why we have to speak openly, honestly, and often about how they're trying to advance their interests so that we can equip our diplomats, politicians, and business people with the knowledge that they need to then act appropriately.
Thank you. Where do you see a role for the federal government in helping businesses, large and small, to avoid political or other pressures from the CCP?
Well, State Department has the ability to issue business advisories. It's a loud megaphone that they can use to talk about the risks of doing business there and encourage the diversification of supply chains. We have other arms of our federal government that can enforce transparency, be it in accounting practices, for instance. We talked about rating agencies earlier and the role that they play with their protected status, allowing investors to outsource their due diligence to S&P and Moody's. I believe the more transparent we are about the threats that we face, the more rational decisions U.S. investors and U.S. companies will make. And we're starting to see this with the foreign direct investment numbers, which have fallen off of a cliff, which suggests to me that even absent clear guidance from the U.S. government, that U.S. businesses are starting to appreciate the depth and the breadth of the risk that they face from doing business in China.
My time is limited here today, but if you could briefly state what resources are currently available at SBA for small businesses to consult regarding China's attempts to infiltrate small family-owned businesses, where do you see the gaps?
I'm not an expert in the SBA, but I do not believe that there is a single source where U.S. businesses and the investment community can go to fully appreciate and understand the risks that they face. And again, we've talked a lot today about the complexity of the problem. That's why we need, as our other panelists have suggested, a whole-of-government approach. But it has to begin with recognizing the nature of the regime. It's not a competitor, it's an adversary.
Thank you. We would hope that the guidance should come from SBA soon to prevent further Chinese access to our communities. The threat China poses to the United States cannot be emphasized enough. I commend this committee, the House Oversight Committee, our chairman, James Comer, for continuing to dive deeper into China's efforts, and I look forward to working with my colleagues to bring more attention to this very real threat. And I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.